Hello and welcome to another Red9 demo. This one hopefully is going to be a little bit different. In the past we've concentrated on specific tools, new functions going into the ProPack, and what I want to do is really back off a little bit and give you more of an overview of what it's like working with the Red9 PuppetRig, working with the ProPack, working with the Studio Pack, how all of those integrate and communicate with each other, all the various layers of tools that we've got that are exposed for the animators and for the TDs. But also to make it very clear that the PuppetRig, whilst we'd like everybody to use it, that'd be great, we're more than aware that a lot of studios have their own solutions for rigging, but might want to use the toolset. So how they connect up and how they use the PuppetRig. The rig itself is built from, well, there's two parts to it really. There is the back end, which is this stuff. This is all the M nodes. These are all the systems underneath the rig that actually communicate with the code. And then there's the actual networks, the actual parts you see in the outline of the physical structures, the physical nodes within the rig. And they're two very separate things, and that's one of the big things. The big thing is that this is what the code communicates with, this is what the animators deal with. So they're two separate things. And that means that we can connect our rigging system up to any other rig, and the ProPack will just accept it as a native rig. There are a few caveats to that. Things like the IKFK switching obviously relies on certain setups, but they're easily subclassed. So that's really important. As for the rig itself, like I say, it's a fairly standard because it's not a bipedal rig, this particular one is. It's a fairly standard modular rigging systems. We've built horses and multi-limbed strange serpent creatures and God knows what else for clients recently. The main thing with this is that it is production tested. It is battered to hell by many AAA studios that are running this as clients at the moment. And the benefit of that is that when you subscribe and you work with us, you gain from all their benefits, but also it shares out. If you find a bug, we fix it for them, and vice versa. So it's more of a community thing, or we're trying anyway. So the rig itself, there are many base aspects of it that we've done. Things like soft IK. Soft IK is one of my bugbears. I hate seeing specifically things like mocap when people are meant to be having their arms held out aloft like that, and you tend to find them backing them off because the animators are frightened of IK pop. I've always hated that. So soft IK is in the system, and basically that just stops this happening. So that's pop, and with soft IK, if we turn the soft IK system on, it will just stop. You can still have it snapping, but it stops that finite popping going on, which is really useful, particularly with mocap, like I say. The soft IK instantly works with the stretch, and it works side by side with the stretch. So as we stretch into, as opposed to what happens in a lot of rigs where you stretch to the point where you're in IK lock and then you stretch, which gives you this horrible kind of strange thing. Much nicer when you do it within soft IK. So that's soft IK. We've also put in recently poll trackers. Now the poll trackers came about from another client requesting it because they were doing a lot of hand key animation, and it was taking time obviously to adjust poll vectors, particularly on things like legs. So if I move the leg out like that and you haven't got poll tracking, you then have to then position the poll, and if you were doing that you then have to then reposition, etc., etc. You get the point. So the whole point with the poll tracking is that it tracks what the legs and the arms are doing, and hopefully it does a good job of it. So if we just turn that on the, if we turn that on the arms, bang, and we select the arm, you can see it's now doing what it should be doing, and it's pretty solid. We calibrate this based on the characters. So each client, when we get a character rig from them, we assess it and we calibrate these things up to make sure they're optimized per character. Same with the autoclave. Again, it's one of these things that some animators hate it, but it's nice to have it, particularly if you run into issues with dirty mocap data. So again, that is calibrated per client, per rig. So this is calibrated as we lift it. We have auto lift. Again, you can turn it off. It's not an issue. Things like the spine and the head are spline-based IK systems. They all have this mid controller, and the mid controller is really a shaper. So if you get to a point where you've got a position like that and you don't like it, you can just retweak how this happens, and you can set up how it's sold and the bias between those systems. Again, I'm not going to dwell too much on some of this stuff because I just wanted to give you an overview of the rig itself, of what's in there, and more importantly, how you work with this stuff. Things like the head has an aim controller, as you'd expect. We can pull that thing out and we can move it around, and lo and behold, he's looking at the thing, as you'd expect. We can also turn that off, and we can turn the pins on. Pins are the same kind of thing, but they just allow you to effectively look in one direction but stabilize the head. These are really useful when you come to things like the the quadrupeds, when you've got long necks. I don't know whether you've had a look on the website, but one of the things we've got on there is a sequence of dinosaurs. They all have their systems in, and it means that you can kind of do this chicken neck basically, where you keep the head and you can move the body around and it pins stuff. So that's one of the cool things. Like I say, they all share these compounds, which means that we can extend the compounds based on the characters. The other thing to note really is the structure within this. This part here, this is the PuppetRig, this is the client side stuff. So we keep the two separate, and we do that for a very good reason. It means that when we're working with clients, particularly with games clients, obviously things like the skinning and additional joints, things like IK blend joints and IK target joints, all the sort of stuff that needs to be client side. Clients still have control of that. They send these files back to us, and we consume them and we publish them within the rig, and it basically pulls all these compounds together, runs a massive health check to make sure the rig is solid and viable, and produces the rig on the outside. But it means there is this flexibility where clients can still tweak stuff. It's not necessarily 100% locked to our code base, which is really useful. We were mentioning about the trackers. If I just take this piece, for example, this is just a piece of mocap data. I'll show you how to get data onto the rigs and in a minute, in the next sequence. But if we take, for example, that pole there, if I delete all the keys off this, delete, bosh, reset, bosh, you'll see that knee will do all sorts of horrible things. And obviously, if you were trying to counter-animate that, that'd be a real pain. But what you can do is just turn the tracker on, and then behold, it does a really tight job of figuring out where that pole should be. That's no animation data, that's just automatically tracking. It works really well with the quadruped rig system. We've got a really nice system for controlling the 3-joint chains, but particularly when you've got the pole tracker on, it makes a really nice job of it. And I think I obviously put on, yes, I'll put the pin on, which is going to make no sense whatsoever on that sequence. If you're looking at that and going, it's all going wrong, that's why. Okay, so that's that. Now, the big thing with all of this, the rig is nice, the rig is tested, etc., etc., etc. But the real key to all of this is how you communicate with the rig, how all the tools talk to this rig, and what's exposed. So you'll notice when I've been right-clicking on this, we have a DagMenu in here. The DagMenu is bound to the class. That's really hard to explain. Imagine you have a body rig, you had a facial rig, two are connected to each other. When you right-click over anything on the M-rig, what it does is it looks at the node it's connected to, and it shows you the relevant system graph, so the relevant DagMenu. So in this case, I'm on the head, so you'll see there's no fingers coming up on there. If I do the same thing on the arm, you'll see we've got toggle fingers, because it knows it's connected to a finger system. So if you connect it to a head system, on a client level, you can override that module and you can put whatever you want exposed to that. It doesn't use the DagMenu proc.mel, so we don't overload the mail one. What we do is we hook into a specific callback in there to build this. So if you've got your own DagMenu procs in there, that's fine, they'll still all work. This will only work when you're connected to something that's got an M-rig on it. I hope that makes sense. But you see there's an awful lot of functions in here. So we have things for selecting systems. So we can go onto the spine. We can zero the spine, we can select the spine system. What else can we do on that? We can key the rig, we can key the spine system. Basically, these top ones are at system level, so we are hovering over something on the spine, so we've got the spine displayed there. If I do the same thing on the leg, you'll see we've got the leg system, so we're at the system level. We can IK-FK switch, so I can do a soft switch on that leg between IK and FK. Switch it back if I wanted to. I can also do the entire thing, so if I wanted to switch everything over to busted that, haven't I? Excuse me, let's just delete that switch key there. Bosh, cut. Let's put it back to where it was. There we go. If I wanted to switch over time, for example, on that leg, what I can do is I can just go in and I can select an area we want to. I can right-click on that. Excuse me, I've got something selected. Let's do that again. I can right-click on that, bring the DagMenu up, and I can go FK switch, match over time. Gives me the frames. Yes, really quickly. And that leg lower hole will now be in FK, excuse me, in FK mode. That happens on all the systems, the spine, the head, the arms, the legs, etc., etc. We've even got tail compounds that do this. It's a dynamic system. But again, because it's bound to the M nodes and it's not specific to our rig, we can do this on any other rigs. We've recently had a very big client that's we've bound this up to their internal rig, and we've had all the RKFK switching working, everything working as if it were just a Red9 Puppet. So that's really important to note. Again, you can see things like the matching over time. So this is the UI that controls all of that if you really wanted to get into it. We can bake things out. We can do a post cache. The post cache is really cool. If I go post cache that frame and I come up there and I go, do you know what, at that point there, I want that to be loaded relative to where that pole is, then it will load it. So you can cache things up, you can move things around. We've got all sorts of things for zeroing, for caching, for timecode management. There's a huge chunk of code in there for timecode, and baking systems out. So if you've got multiple rigs, if you've got a rig on multiple anim layers, you can bake it out. If you've got things constrained, again, you can bake it out directly at the node level. But more importantly, what I can do is I can load up the character picker. Now the picker it's a dynamic picker. The whole point of this is that it's bound to the rig. Again, nothing is specific to our Puppet rig. Again, we'd love everyone to use Red9 Puppet, but we're more than aware that's not always going to be the case. So if we, that's just my viewport mangling up, excuse me, it's all right, I need to replace my graphics card. If I select on here, it will select in there. If I select in here, it will refresh it. If I shift select, it will double select. I can shift select, I can control select, I can alt select, which means I'm selecting the entire leg system. I can shift alt select, which will give me both leg systems and an arm system, or I can control. So it's for selecting multiple components. And it gives you feedback, like I say, which is really cool. But the real nice thing about this is it's dynamic. And by dynamic, I mean you can add any controller onto this, you can add any button onto this, you can add any pose onto this even. So, for example, if I come into this, we know I can't see, for example, there is no head aim controller in there. So if I go to edit mode, I add it in. I go right click, add controller, we'll add, there we go. And we'll have it looking like that as a target. These things, by the way, these are all things that are connected to the M systems that aren't currently displayed in this view. So it already gives you everything that's there, and you can just drop them in if you wanted to. So that's our head aim. I can move it where I want. I can right click, set the size, change the icon, but I can also set the command on it. If I come out of edit mode, for example, and I hit that button, it selects it, but the thing's hidden. That's no use. So maybe I want a right click functionality on this. Maybe I want a new function that says toggle it. Okay, so let's do that. If I go edit mode on, lo and behold, I've got some code here that I did earlier, which is really simple, which is just that, which is effectively setting up a string with the head aim attribute on it. This is walking assistance, we'll go through that in a minute. There's my head controller, and I'm just going to toggle it. So if I copy that piece of code, select that, go to set command. I'm going to add a new action, which will be called toggle, select toggle, paste that in there, come out, come off edit mode. I can select it. Now when I right click, lo and behold, we've got a thing called toggle, which turns the thing on. Okay, so it's really flexible. You can add custom buttons. You can also add poses. So if I open the Studio Pack, remember I was saying earlier on that this all talks to Studio Pack and everything knows about each other. If I select pose in Studio Pack, and again come into edit mode, that button there, if I go edit, you'll see it's dropped that pose into the UI. And I can do however many I want. Let's do that one, for example, that pose there. And basically I've got these selected in the UI. If I come out of edit again, let's just scale it back down so it looks a bit neater. If I now do that, he'll load to that pose, he'll load to that pose. If I right click, I can blend the pose, so I can blend in poses. So it gives you the ability to really tailor how you want to display, what you want to show per character. You can set the views. Obviously the image that you see in there is flexible. You can have as many different views as you want in here, and it's all, like I say, dynamic, but it's dynamic at the character level. So if you have multiple characters that are all very different, when you switch between the characters either with this thing or when you load a new character in, it will dynamically switch to that character and you'll get the new view for that particular rig. But again, it's based on the M rigs, it's not based on our systems. Okay. So if we just quickly look at this code, I don't want to dwell too much on code because I'm more than aware that that's kind of a very specific thing. But this is really important. All the functions that we have inside this and all the functions we have inside ProPack, all of this stuff, is exposed directly to this rig. And that's really crucial. It's exposed at the M node level. So again, we did it earlier on. We said, there's the M rig. These are all the nodes that I know we have in the rig. These are all the bits that the schematic view, if you like, that fits over the rig like a glove, that you can do with your own rig. And all of these functions are exposed. So for example, if I move him over there and I go and get another rig in, standard rig. Load it in, come on, there we go, another rig in. Let's take that one off. Instantly, because I've done that, the character picker will have switched over to this new rig because I've just imported this rig. So all the functions that you're used to doing are all bound to the rig. So if I do that one to that one, I'm going to copy the attributes, which effectively is copy and pose, bosh, between the two. I've left this thing off, this include roots, because I want to show you the difference between the two. So that's copying the pose effectively. I can copy keys, so I can do from him to him, copy over that time range, and he will do over that time range. Now his world space is obviously completely different from this one. If I wanted to do the same thing but have him copy him at his world space and adjust for it, I can do the same thing. I can go him to him over world space. It takes a little bit of time obviously because it's recalculating the world space, but he will now be bang into his space. I can set hierarchies, I can set offsets. So all of this stuff that's in here, if I wanted to mirror him for example, is all set within this UI, but it's all then exposed here. Okay, so for example, if we get the M rig, this is a node that we communicate with, this is the M rig itself. And remember we're saying everything is wired to subnetworks. So for example, I can go left leg system, that gives me back the actual left leg system itself. And lo and behold, off the leg system we have all our controllers. So I can go pole, for example, and get the pole back. So everything is a case of walking these networks. And that means that when we're adapting it to other clients' rigs, or if a client is adapting our system to their own rig, all they have to do is make sure that these wires point to the same controllers, and lo and behold, everything will work. And that's the benefit of it. But the other thing is that I can quite easily in this, if I load, for example, a fresh rig in here, let's just load a clean rig. If I were to drop some animation data onto this rig, all of the functions for doing this are bound. So there's our M rig. He's doing nothing. We have a function called load animation. Surprise, surprise. And I'm going to point it to an R9 anim file. Again, we'll go through those in a minute. But by literally one line of code, we get the rig, and I'm going to go load animation. It will load it in, and it will load that data up. There we go. Syntax error. Yeah, that's just me being a dick, excuse me. So there's that animation loaded back up. So it's all bound. And again, I can do things like copying animation, I can copy poses, I can mirror the rig. If I want to mirror that animation data, lo and behold, he's now going off in that direction. So the M rig itself has this huge back-end network for managing animation, for communicating with all of the tool sets, for communicating with all of this stuff. It's all exposed at the M rig level. And more importantly, it's exposed with the export systems. So we have our own export systems, we have our own animation systems, and all of these are exposed through the M rig, and they're all there as a wrapper, but it's this layer that you're communicating with. Sorry to go on about that, but that's really important that people understand that. We've gone through that, gone through animation UI, we've copied that out. I think that's it really for the rig that I wanted to go through. What I want to do next is really go through some of the aspects of getting animation data onto this. Obviously I've loaded animation data through the R9 anim, which is our own custom format. We've recently sped that up tenfold, literally. It's got really, really fast recently. But it's got a huge amount of flexibility within it. So what I want to do next, which will be in the next video, is to go through how we go from raw FBX data, how we get data onto these rigs, how we clean that data up, things that are exposed to allow you to do that in a better, smoother way, and how that fits into the rest of the pipeline, how that fits into talking to the exporters, and the exporters talking back to the animation load save systems. So it's all internet, all interneted. Thanks for watching. Hope some of that was useful. Hope you carry on watching the next one. Thank you. Bye.